We hadn't spoken in years. Not since the funeral. But when we unlocked Grandma's house, just to clear out the dust and donate old clothes, we found something none of us expected. Letters. One for each of us. Written by the woman who held our broken family together, even after death. And what happened next? Changed everything. Welcome to the Grace and Tears Chronicles. Stories that won't always end the way you hope, but they'll undoubtedly leave a mark. And now let's begin. The night we unlocked Grandma's house for the first time since her funeral, we thought we were just cleaning out her stuff. We didn't know she had left us a treasure that would fix our broken family. Rain hit the windows as I turned the key. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and those butterscotch candies she always kept in glass bowls around the rooms. For a moment I almost thought I'd hear her calling from the kitchen, asking if we wanted tea. Family isn't just who you're born with, she used to tell me while kneading bread dough, her hands steady and sure. It's who you choose to keep showing up for, even when it's hard. But there was only silence now. After the funeral, no one wanted to come back. Not Mom, who had spent years avoiding Grandma's questions about dating again. Not Aunt Lee, who had moved across the country after that big Christmas fight. Not Uncle Ron, who'd borrowed money he never paid back. Too many sad memories. Too much pain. Too many things no one talked about. But the house needed to be cleaned out. So on a cold Saturday morning we showed up, me, Mom, my little brother Caleb, and 3 relatives who could barely look at each other. "I'll take the kitchen," Mom said, already putting on rubber gloves like she was preparing for battle. "I can do the garage," Uncle Ron offered, picking the spot farthest from everyone else. "I'll help Sarah with the bedrooms," Aunt Lee said, not looking at me directly. She hadn't really looked at me since I dropped out of the college she'd helped pay for 2 years ago, right after my second panic attack in the lecture hall. It had been 6 years since Dad died in that car crash. The drunk driver got 3 years in jail. We got a lifetime of sadness. And we hadn't really been a family since. I took Grandma's bedroom, the room no one else wanted to face. Caleb followed me, his 12-year-old fingers touching the quilt she'd made for her 50th anniversary, an anniversary Grandpa never lived to see. "Do you think she was lonely?" Caleb asked, picking up the photo of Grandpa on the nightstand. His face looked so much like Dad's it made my heart hurt. Caleb had always been the thoughtful one in our family. Mom said he was born with an old soul. While other kids his age were glued to video games, he was the one who remembered everyone's birthdays and noticed when someone was upset. "I don't know," I said. "She never told us." The silence in the house felt heavier than the dust. Then the arguing started in the kitchen when Mom found Grandma's recipe box. "She promised this would be mine," she said, voice getting louder as Aunt Lee walked in with an armful of sheets and towels. "Like you'd use it," Aunt Lee said with a mean laugh. "You barely cook anymore. And whose fault is that? Some of us couldn't afford housekeepers." Uncle Ron appeared in the doorway. At least Lee visited more than just Christmas and Easter. Old hurts, sharp words, and that awful feeling of being together but not connected. I closed the bedroom door to block their voices and started going through Grandma's closet. Caleb had wandered off, probably escaping the fighting downstairs. Smart kid. That's when I noticed the loose floorboard near the closet. Grandma's house was old, built in the 1940s with all kinds of quirks. But this board seemed like it was meant to come up. Curious, I pried it up with my fingernail. And there it was. A small hole in the floor with a metal box inside. An old cookie tin. I carefully lifted it out and opened the lid. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. Each one had a name written in Grandma's neat handwriting. Sarah on one. Melanie on another for Mom. Lee. Ronald. Caleb. Even one for Dad, though he was long gone. Seeing his name in her handwriting made my throat tight. Maybe she wrote it before he died. Or maybe, like the rest of us, she still needed to say things to him that were left unsaid. I opened mine with shaky hands, the paper making noise as I unfolded it. "If you're reading this, you're probably arguing downstairs." That line stopped me cold. I ran to the stairs and called down, "Everyone, come here. Now." Maybe it was how urgent I sounded, but the arguing stopped. They all came upstairs, looking annoyed until they saw what I was holding. "What's that?" Mom asked, her voice suddenly small. "Letters from Grandma. For each of us." We sat on her bed, the springs squeaking under our weight. I handed out the envelopes as Caleb appeared at the door, breathing hard, holding an old shoebox. I found this in the attic, he said. It's full of pictures I've never seen before. But the letters caught everyone's attention first. The letters were different for each of us. Mine told me to stop hiding who I really was. That Dad's death wasn't a reason to stop living my life. That dropping out of college wasn't the mistake, it was never telling anyone why I couldn't sit in classrooms anymore without feeling panic. Your father would have understood, she wrote. He failed 3 classes his first semester before figuring out he needed to study differently than everyone else. Ask your mother about it sometime. I looked up to see Mom staring at her letter, tears running down her face. Caleb's letter reminded him that a torn quilt doesn't mean torn love. That Grandma had seen how he tried to make peace between everyone, how he felt guilty for fights that weren't his fault. Mom's letter said she didn't fail. That she held the family together longer than anyone else could have. That grief has no timeline, but neither does love. Aunt Lee's hands shook as she read hers. She knew about the baby, she whispered. The one I lost. The one I never told anyone about except Tom. Uncle Ron's face crumpled like I'd never seen before. She forgave the money, he said in a rough voice. She knew about my gambling, all of it, even when I thought I was hiding it from everyone. He took a deep breath. She came to my first Gamblers Anonymous meeting 8 months ago. Just sat in the back. Never mentioned it afterward, just hugged me longer than usual. In that moment, the bedroom stopped being a place of death. It became a place of truth-telling. We talked. Really talked. We told the truth for the first time in years. Mom admitted she'd been dating someone for months but was afraid to tell us, thinking it would dishonor Dad's memory. I explained about the panic attacks, about how I couldn't focus on lectures anymore, about how I was seeing a therapist but couldn't bear to disappoint anyone by admitting something was wrong. Aunt Lee revealed that her perfect marriage had almost ended 3 years ago, and the pressure of pretending everything was fine had pushed her away from the family she actually needed. Uncle Ron confessed his gambling problem was much worse than he'd let on. I'm 8 months clean now, he said, but I almost lost everything before that. The house, the car. I was in so deep. Then Caleb opened the shoebox. Inside were photos from across many years. Grandma and Grandpa, young and laughing. Mom and Aunt Lee as teenagers, making silly faces. Dad holding me as a baby. Uncle Ron winning a baseball trophy. But it was the later photos that hit hardest. All of us together at Dad's funeral holding onto each other. Then fewer and fewer group pictures as the years passed. The family falling apart photo by photo. Until the final image, Grandma alone on her porch last summer, looking at the camera with knowing eyes. On the back, she'd written, "Waiting for you all to come home." We stayed up until 3 in the morning, crying, laughing, remembering. The house didn't feel empty anymore. The next day, something strange happened. We stayed. I was thinking, Mom said over coffee. The porch railing is falling apart. We should fix that before we decide what to do with the house. But somehow, we all knew that the house wasn't going to be sold. We painted the porch that weekend, the color Grandma had always wanted. A bright, cheerful yellow instead of the plain white it had been for decades. Caleb planted tomatoes in the side garden, carefully following the instructions in Grandma's gardening notebook we found in the kitchen drawer. Uncle Ron fixed the broken handrail on the stairs, his big hands surprisingly gentle with the old wood. Aunt Lee sorted through Grandma's books, finding pressed flowers and notes in the margins that made her smile through tears. Sunday dinners didn't start right away. At first, we just worked on the house on weekends, ordering pizza or making sandwiches. But by the 3rd weekend, Mom brought a casserole. The next weekend, Aunt Lee made dessert. 6 weeks after finding the letters, we had our first real family dinner around Grandma's table. And these dinners, they became our new tradition. Mom cooked using Grandma's recipes, each of us taking turns hosting. Even Aunt Lee began flying in 1 weekend a month. We found more of Grandma's hidden treasures as we fixed up the house. Notes tucked in books. A jar of beach glass in the attic labeled, "For Sarah's Art." A college fund for Caleb she'd been quietly saving up. A collection of Dad's childhood drawings she'd kept. Uncle Ron moved into the garage apartment after his divorce was final, turning it into a workshop where he started making furniture like Grandpa once did. Aunt Lee brought her husband for Christmas, and they announced they were having a baby after years of trying. Mom's boyfriend, now fiancé, helped us replace the roof, working alongside us like he'd always been part of the family. 3 months after finding the letters, I decided to go back to school. This time, I enrolled in online courses, sitting at Grandma's writing desk by the window that looked out at the garden where Caleb's tomatoes now grew. Mrs. Peterson, the neighbor who had lived next door for 30 years, stopped by one afternoon as I was planting flowers along the walkway. "It's good to see life in this house again," she said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. June would be so happy. She always said this place needed the sound of people arguing about where to hang the pictures. She laughed softly. I guess she knew what she was doing all along. Grandma's house wasn't just her legacy. It became ours. A year after that first weekend, we hung a sign over the front door that Uncle Ron carved from oak that had fallen in the backyard. It says, "June's house built on love, rebuilt on forgiveness." It's not perfect. The floors still creak. We still argue sometimes. There are days when grief hits us hard like it just happened. But we're not walking away anymore. And every Sunday, we leave one chair empty at the head of the table. Not because Grandma's gone, but because she's still here. Sometimes during dinner when everyone's talking at once and laughter fills the rooms, I swear I can feel her smiling. In the quiet moment before someone speaks, I feel her presence like sunshine after rain. Yesterday I found another letter, this one hidden in my favorite book on her shelf. The one I'd been meaning to read for years but never made time for. It was newer than the others, written just weeks before she died. "Dear Sarah," it read. "By now you've probably found the others. But this one is just for you. You're the keeper now. The one who remembers. The one who brings them back together when they start to drift apart. It's not always an easy job, but it's an important one. Your grandfather did it for us. I did it after him. Now it's your turn. Remember, families aren't broken or whole. They're always both. Always being rebuilt. Always worth the work." I folded the letter and put it back in the book, but not before writing my own note under hers. "I promise, Grandma. The light stays on. The door stays open. And your love stays alive in each of us. Because that's what she taught us in the end. The most valuable thing she left us wasn't money or property or even memories. It's the courage to choose each other. Again and again despite the hurt. Despite the distance. Despite the time lost. It's coming home to the broken places and building something beautiful from what remains."